Good morning. I want to thank all of you for being here. My name is Bruce Purcellay. I'm the chairman of the board of the Edward M. Kennedy Institute for the United States Senate. This important discussion this morning is part of our 10th anniversary for the Institute. We are celebrating Ted Kennedy's vision, which was to create a building and an educational organization designed to promote democracy among young people. Over the past 5 years, this organization has taken a larger vision. We are now the leading and most influential institute educating people as to the importance of bipartisanship. Our partnerships with the Hatch Foundation, the Dole Foundation, and McCain Foundation are a demonstration of our commitment to bipartisanship. Our board includes 8 former U.S. senators, 4 Republicans, and 4 Democrats, and a group of individuals from both sides of the aisle. Never before in recent times has this country been more divided, and is the notion of bipartisanship more important than it is today. Ted Kennedy and Orrin Hatch were our shining light of how Democrats and Republicans, no matter how different they may think, can work together as Americans. Both politicians were prolific legislators together in the best interest of this country. Our special guest tonight, Vice President Pence, has demonstrated a commitment to democracy, a belief in our system of government, and actually put his life at risk for the principles that he believes in. Our institute stands for many things, but most importantly, it is the right of people to express difference of opinions, different viewpoints, and to have the freedom of independent thought without fearing for their lives, without fearing for retribution, and without concern as to its impact on them or the country itself. We are proud to have Vice President Pence here. He is a man of deep faith who has given us faith that there are those out there who will do whatever it takes to defend our democracy. I would now like to introduce our CEO, Adam Hines, who will in turn introduce the Vice President. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce. My name is Adam, the CEO of the Institute, as you just heard, and it is an honor to welcome you all to this exact replica of the United States Senate chamber. And to those of you joining us online, welcome to you as well. This space was created with a purpose. It's to remind us of our history and the responsibility and the promise of our governing institutions. And so it is such a fitting setting for today's gathering. It's a real privilege to welcome Vice President Mike Pence and Meghan McCain as part of the Institute's 10th anniversary programming. The Vice President's presence here marks a return to the rostrum where he spoke so powerfully to the nation as President of the Senate when the Congress returned to work in the middle of the night after January 6th. And it remains a stark reminder of the fragility of our governing institutions. It calls on all of us, elected officials and civilians alike, to renew our commitment to engaging with one another, to courage, and to the rule of law. That work is not the task of one party. It's not even the task of one generation, but it is a task for all of us. And Meghan, we are grateful for your voice as well, one that has carried forward the legacy of your father, Senator John McCain, with candor and principle. And I note that, as you just heard from Bruce, because the Kennedy Institute has partnered proudly with the McCain Institute on a number of programs to advance the cause of strengthening American democracy. Together, we believe that gatherings like this help bend our politics towards trust and toward the higher purpose of a democracy worthy of its people. A quick programming note, we are going to have an opportunity for questions and answers a little past halfway through the program, so prepare your questions. And now, please help me in welcoming the 48th Vice President of the United States, Mike Pence, and Meghan McCain.
Good afternoon. Thank you all so much for being here. I am so deeply honored to be here with you all today at the Edward Kennedy Institute, and obviously with you, Vice President Pence. I'm just so thrilled we have this amazing opportunity to speak in front of you, but we're also being live streamed on my show, Citizen McCain Through Two Ways. So thank you all so much for this wonderful opportunity, and everyone watching online as well. I am so honored to be here but I'm getting some flashbacks because my dad was very good friends with Senator Kennedy. And when I was little, when I would go visit my dad in the Senate, Senator Kennedy had these really beautiful Portuguese water dogs, which I'm sure some of you remember, and I would go play with them, I think just to distract me while my dad was doing more serious things. And I just really wanted to start off, do you have any memories of Senator Kennedy, or politically or personally, Vice President?
Well, first off, Meghan, it's so good to see you.
You too.
I not only admired your late father, but we were friends.
Yeah.
We cherish his memory and the legacy of leadership. And I also want to thank Bruce and the entire board here at the Kennedy Institute for bringing a couple of Republicans onto the floor. I must tell you, maybe me a little bit more than you, but this place looks awfully familiar to me. I used to sit a little bit higher up, but it's really a joy to be with you. And I must say, I do have memories of not only Senator Kennedy, but also of the dogs. It was 20 years ago. I was the chairman of the House Conservative caucus, and we had come up with a proposal for reforming immigration. It was something Senator Kennedy had worked throughout his life on. And he took an interest in the proposal that we had, which was, I described it as a no amnesty 21st century guest worker program. And we had a thorough conversation in his office that day, with the dogs running in and out. But I appreciated very much, while we didn't work together on that issue, I appreciated his legacy of leadership as much as I appreciated your father's. You know, when I think of days that I was serving as president of the Senate, that day in July when your father returned after his diagnosis, and the remarks that he made on the floor, I think should be required viewing for virtually every American, particularly in these divisive times in which we live, because your dad didn't vote the way I wanted him to that day.
The infamous thumbs down.
Just in case he's looking on, I haven't forgotten. But his words about challenging the United States Senate to return to the legislative process, to do the people's work, to find principled common cause, I think is a timely word for us today. And so we're grateful to be here at the Institute, but I'm grateful for all those that have gone before, that have, in the chamber of which this bears an uncanny resemblance. It is a place the American people have sent our elected representatives since the Constitution was minted. And in particular, the Senate is where we have always forged a way to form a more perfect union and to do that together. And I'm pleased to be here in that spirit.
Yes. In the spirit of bipartisanship and legacy, I know I'm friends with your daughter, Charlotte, and I messaged her and I said, I'm interviewing your dad. What should I ask him? And she said, ask him about his journey from being a Democrat to a Republican, and I was like, oh, he was a Democrat. When did that happen? So would you mind sharing? I did not know that about you, and I think it's very interesting. So.
Well, thanks a lot, Charlotte. My daughter is a big fan of yours and is an accomplished author, married to a naval aviator. You'd be glad to know, who will be deploying very soon out to sea. But yeah, she's absolutely right. I started in politics as the Youth Democrat Party coordinator in Bartholomew County in Indiana in 1975. And sometimes I tell my conservative friends, I admit that I voted for Jimmy Carter. And they say very forgivingly, they say, well, everybody voted for Carter in '76. And I say, no, I voted for him in 1980.
They're like, get out of here.
But it was, candidly, it was listening to the values and the principles of Ronald Reagan once he was in office that I felt drawn to the Republican Party, his commitment to a strong national defense, his commitment to America as the leader of the free world, commitment to free market economics, including free trade, and traditional values that drew me to the Republican Party. And I joined the Reagan Revolution and never looked back. But it's one of the things that animates my life in this season that I'm in, is that it's important to me that the Republican Party still hold to that traditional conservative agenda, that pro-growth agenda, that agenda of American leadership on the world stage, because it's a debate, as you know, Meghan, that's happening within the Republican Party today, whether we're going to stay true to that traditional Reagan conservatism that's defined the party for more than half a century, or, as I like to say, whether the Republican Party will follow the siren song of populism unmoored to conservative principle. And so whatever remains of my public life, I hope to continue to be a voice for those values that drew me to the party to begin with, and I think have always made America strong and prosperous and free.
Yeah, and I think we're going to get to that in the wave of populism happening in the country, both on the left and the right. But I would be remiss if I didn't ask you that as of the second we walked out here, the government is officially shut down. According to New York Times Siena poll, 65% of voters say Democrats should not shut the government down if their demands are not met. It's wildly unpopular. What do you make of what's happening, and what do you say to people who are wildly frustrated? And average people can't just say, I'm not coming to work, and so I'm shutting my work down. And, you know, people really, really are very angry.
Well, we went through a long government shutdown during our administration when I was serving as vice president. And it was over the issue of border security and border funding. We ultimately resolved the issue separately and reopened the government. But it was on a policy issue, on an issue that was affecting people across the country. It's one of the things I really commend the new Trump administration for, is ending the crisis at our southern border. But I think what's different about this time is that now the argument is not over one party wanting to spend more and another party wanting to cut spending, which were always debates that I welcomed. But rather, it's now the difference between the Republican Party that wants to add $2 trillion to the national debt and the Democratic Party that wants to add $3 trillion to the national debt. And so for me, it's disappointing to see that people couldn't find a way to move forward, continue to fund vital programs that millions of Americans depend upon. But it's also frustrating that the consensus in Washington, D.C. Seems to be that we're going to do nothing about the national debt. I mean, I got to know Elon Musk when I was vice president. I was chairman of the National Space Council. I'm very proud of the progress that we made working with his company and other companies to put American astronauts back in space on American rockets from American soil. And I commend the efforts of the Department of Government Efficiency.
Doge.
But the fact that the Doge was only permitted to focus on a small percentage of the federal budget rightly setting aside defense spending, which we need to be doing more of, but to look at the massive welfare state that we have and say that we can't make common sense and compassionate changes, I think is a disappointment. And the fact that there seems to be a consensus in Washington that we will do nothing to set our ship of state back on a path of fiscal responsibility. Again, I think about that speech your dad gave back in 2017. I think if we're going to tackle a nearly $40 trillion national debt, it's actually going to take both parties to do it, to pass the kind of reforms that'll make sure those programs are still there for people that need them, but that are modernized in the 21st century era. And so that to me is the other disappointing aspect of this.
How long do you think it'll be closed, or is that too difficult to predict?
Say again.
How long do you think the government will be shut down?
I think that will largely depend upon the Democratic leadership in the House and Senate. Mm-hmm. The one issue that I think Republicans need to stand firm on is the issue of Obamacare subsidies. The subsidies were increased dramatically in 2021 in the name of the pandemic under the Biden administration. That was meant to be temporary. It's set to lapse down from 400% of the federal poverty level. I think Republicans need to stand firm on that principle, win on that issue. I think if Democrats yield on that point, there's probably a way forward.
Sure. I want to switch gears a little bit and talk to you about the horrific assassination of Charlie Kirk and, the climate in the country, how everyone's feeling. It's probably no surprise to anyone, my community of friends that I'm very close to are predominantly in Republican politics and Republican media circles, and for the most part, they're all very angry and very scared. And I just want to read a few data points for you in the audience. In the past 4 years, there's been an attempted assassination of Supreme Court Justice Kavanaugh and other justices in response to the Dobbs decision. We've seen the assassination attempt of President Trump twice, almost successful. Obviously, the assassination of Charlie Kirk. Now we're seeing targeting of ICE agents, ICE facilities, religious schools, and Jewish citizens. The vast number of these attacks have a political motive at Republicans. And people are saying that, and there's a sentiment that the targets are mostly towards Republicans. Do you think this is as a result of the villainizing of conservatives for so long? And you can disagree with me on the premise if you think that the target's happening on the left as well.
Well, first let me just say I'm still heartsick about the assassination of Charlie Kirk. Good and decent and honorable young man, strong faith, who literally gave his life championing free and open debate on America's university campuses. But violence is always wrong. But political violence must be universally condemned. And I look at the tragedy of Charlie's assassination. I look at the attack on Governor Shapiro's home and family in Pennsylvania, the attack that claimed the life of the Democrat leader in Minnesota, and of course the 2 assassination attempts against President Trump. And I think of a fateful day 4 years ago where people assaulted police officers at the United States Capitol. And I have 2 reactions. First is that I think we need to resist the temptation of putting America on trial anytime a deranged individual breaks the law and engages in violence against our citizens. Absent more facts, the man who was responsible for Charlie Kirk's assassination was the man on the roof with the rifle. And I hold the view that we ought to think seriously about reforms that make justice more swift and more certain. in cases of mass shootings, in the cases of political violence. I do believe that the very idea that that someone who engages in any number of these political public acts or mass shootings would languish in prison for 20 or 30 years. That's not justice. Justice delayed is justice denied. And I think we ought to think very seriously about how we expedite, without compromising due process, how we expedite the prosecution and ultimately justice delivered to people that engage in these crimes. Beyond that, I will tell you that I think democracy depends on heavy doses of civility. And that it is incumbent on all of us that have been in public roles to think carefully about the way we talk about one another. I mean, I really do believe that you can disagree without being disagreeable, which doesn't mean that I've never been disagreeable.
I have never.
You've never. I mean, you can throw some sharp elbows from time to time, but the objective of saying, I can say that you're wrong on an issue without saying you're a bad person. And I feel like we've slipped off that railing in the political debate. The last thing I'd say is our politics is more divided than any time in my lifetime. But Meghan, I'm not convinced the American people are as divided as our politics. I mean, I tell people, you get 15 miles out of Washington, D.C., the people in this country actually get along pretty well. We know how to talk to people that disagree with us. We live next door to people that we don't see eye to eye on everything. Co-workers, friends, people we go to church or synagogue or mosque with. Americans find a way to work together. It's just, we've got to have government as good as our people again. And but this violence, the political violence, as I said, has to be universally condemned. We must bring it to an end with swift and certain justice, but also recognize the way we talk about one another can be exploited by deranged and weak-minded people to justify acts.
I agree with you that no individual group of people should be scapegoated when a crazy maniac enacts an act of violence. I also don't think that's fair. One of the things that I am concerned about, though, is according to a recent YouGov survey, 26% of liberals under 45 years old, compared to just 7% of younger conservatives, have said that political violence is sometimes justified. I worry about young people in perspective of this. And again, it's generational. This is not something that older liberals agree with. Do you worry about and this is in regards to the shooter as well, just the overall indoctrination of hate from the internet and social media, because that seems to be a big root of these problems?
I do, and I would say here at the Edward M. Kennedy Institute, that YouGov survey should be a wake-up call for my friends in the Democratic Party and leaders on the progressive left in this country. The very idea that you would have, by a factor of 5 times more young people on the left who would say that violence is sometimes justified should be deeply troubling to people of goodwill across the spectrum. And that's why I say political violence has to be universally condemned. We created these institutions in the Constitution of the United States to sort out our differences and to form a more perfect union. And we've done that with extraordinary success. It'll be 250 years from the Declaration next year, and a few years down the road, it'll be 250 years from the Constitution. And we just have to train up our children, as the good book says, in the way they should go. And the way they should go is, let's solve our differences in the political process, in elections and in debates on floors like this one. And reject any notion that would ever justify violence.
Yeah. No, I think any rational person agrees with that. And I think we all implore everyone everywhere to take the temperature down, because this is a very scary time. Anyone who's doing any kind of public events, there's just something in the back of your head that's like, is a crazy person going to show up? And that's on the left and the right, so I agree with you. I want to switch gears a little bit again. The new second term of Trump's administration is pretty different than the first term, and the cabinet has a different makeup. I just wanted to know if you would mind gossiping with me and telling me who you think is doing a great job in the second term, and if you think anyone is doing a weak job. You can plead the fifth if this is too. I don't know if this is too spicy for the Kennedy Institute, but I just wanted to know.
Well, first off, I'm very proud of the record of the Trump-Pence administration. I had someone ask me on an airplane the other day who I got the feeling their politics didn't agree with mine. But he said to me, why did you accept that nomination? And I said, because I thought we could help the country. And I think we did. We rebuilt our military. We stood with our allies, stood up to our enemies. We put together a team that was able to pass the largest tax cuts and tax reform in history, unleashed American energy, stood for values, appointed conservatives to our courts to stand on the Constitution. And of course, as a pro-life American, for me, seeing the Supreme Court give the American people a new beginning for life is something I'll cherish the rest of my life. It didn't end the way I wanted it to, but I'm proud of that record. It is different personnel in this Trump administration, although somebody did talk to me the other day. They said, you know, I know everything's different, but if you have any insights about how things are working. And I said, well, a lot of people are different, but nothing's really different. Because the leadership style the president has is that major decisions are made by one person. The President of the United States. And I expect that's still the case. The President's got a team around him that gives him input, but I think the President is still making the same decisions. I will tell you, I've been impressed with the national security team around the President. I do believe that Senator Marco Rubio is a great American leader. I think that the counsel that he's offered to the President and others that gave the President the counsel that led to using U.S. military forces against Iran. And I must tell you, I've been a strong advocate. I'm someone that believes from the outset of the brutal and unprovoked invasion by Russia into Ukraine that the American people and our allies across the West must continue to give Ukraine what they need to repel and defeat the Russian invasion. And now, with some stops and starts early in the administration, again, the President, I think, has gotten to a better place, sending a very decisive message to Vladimir Putin after his laudable efforts at negotiating peace in Alaska and in a White House conference. And so I'm very pleased with the President's national security team. I will also tell you, I think ending the crisis at our southern border is a historic achievement. And ensuring that those Trump-Pence tax cuts were all extended, I think, was a great benefit to the economy. I've got arguments on some other policy issues, and we've made them publicly, but I think the President's been well served in all those areas.
Do you think he's a different kind of president in 2025 than he was in 2016?
Do I think he's different?
Yeah, like, do you think he's leading differently, or?
It would be hard to know in the close quarters of the West Wing whether he's leading differently, but from the outside, you know, I'd often have people in my 4 years in office say, you know, what's President Trump really like in person? And I'd say, you ever seen a rally? They'd say, yeah, and I said, like that. We'd have lunch in this back dining room just off the Oval Office on a regular basis. And whatever he was saying at the end of the table, it was just him and me. He was saying in front of 20,000 people that night. So I think what you see is what you get. And look, I want to say, you know, again, I'm very grateful to see the President stand strong with Israel, to stand up to Iran. I am hopeful as the hours tick by that the brutal, murderous Hamas will accept the deal that's now broadly accepted by Arab nations and Israel and the United States and our allies to end the bloodshed, to lay down their arms, to allow the supervised demilitarization of Gaza. It's an extraordinary step, but I think the fact that the president's made it very clear that failing that, we will stand by Israel as they do whatever they need to do. I traveled to Israel 2 months after October 7th. I walked through a kibbutz called Kfar Aza. Literally walked into the little homes in this kibbutz that was within eyesight of the border of Gaza, a border that had been breached on October 7th at 90 different locations. I mean, it wasn't, as you probably know well, Megan, it wasn't a terrorist attack. It was a terrorist invasion of Israel. It was really designed to cut Israel in half with the hope that Hezbollah would come down from the north. But for the courage of law enforcement, the military, and an awful lot of courageous civilians, they were stopped. But walking through that kibbutz and seeing where people had literally been tortured, brutalized, bullet holes in the walls, bloodstains on the carpets, it's clear to me that Israel cannot abide the continued presence of Hamas in Gaza or anywhere else. And I think the president's made it clear there's a pathway now to end the violence. But again, I think that the president's leadership in that space has been admirable, and leadership in Ukraine's been admirable. But I would say, as your late father might say, if he were still around, we've got a long way to go to have the commitment to national defense that we need to meet our obligations in the 21st century. And I think I'm someone that believes that Senator Roger Wicker's bill that would move us up to a dramatic increase in spending on our national defense is a pathway forward and the pathway to peace.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with you, and I wholeheartedly agree with what you're saying about Israel. One of the things, as someone who's a supporter of Israel in the same way that you are, that's alarming is seeing a lot of shifting happening, not only with young people on their support of Israel. Obviously, the Democrat Party has, it's very unpopular and has seen in the rise of people like Mamdani more than likely becoming the next mayor of New York, but it's also happening on the right in populist circles, especially with different media figures. How concerned are you about the Republican Party's support of Israel going forward in 2028?
Well, enmity toward Israel is not new on the progressive left. There have been those voices on the margin, despite the fact, let me be clear, the Democratic Party historically has been a bulwark of support for Israel, even before many Republicans in the Congress were there. I call Israel our most cherished ally, and for me to have been a part of an administration that was clearly the strongest pro-Israel administration since 1948. It was a great honor to me. But to your point, I think it's important for Republicans and conservatives to confront the enmity toward Israel that is rising on the populist right, including by some very dominant voices in the media and in your world. There are those even that are now talking about that the United States should have allied with Hitler instead of Stalin, which is an atrocious historical assertion, easily rebutted. But it struck me that when some of those same voices came out against using military force against Iran, Meghan, I think they lost their footing with the president. He's got a strong commitment to the security of Israel and has demonstrated that consistently. But when those voices came out and said you can't use military force against Iran to take down their nuclear program, I think the president made it pretty clear how incomprehensible he thought that was. And these are the same voices that have been saying for years that we should cut off all funding to Ukraine and essentially let Russia have their way in Eastern Europe. And I think it is part of a rising tide of isolationism on the populist right. But I would say to you, the Donald Trump I know is not an isolationist. His bias is actually to lead. His bias is actually to be out front. And I, for one, am encouraged to see the president returning to that with regard to Eastern Europe. And I commended the president publicly for unleashing our Air Force to move against Iran.
Talking about populism, the populist right and the populist left is really gaining momentum, power, popularity. When I look forward to what could happen in 2028, and you see some more moderate figures flirting with the idea of running for president, like Rahm Emanuel was just in Iowa looking like he was giving a stump speech, I really can't see a place where he could be the nominee, just simply because I think he is more moderate. What do you think the future of these pathways hold? Because there is a very popular and powerful silent majority of independents and center-right and center-left people that aren't necessarily on board with this direction that both parties are going in.
Well, I have great confidence about the future.
Okay, good.
I really do. If you go to Washington, D.C., sometime this fall, visit the National Archives, because for the first time in American history, the entire Constitution is on display. Every page of it. They've never done that before. I took the interns from our foundation in Washington, D.C., from our offices across the street, and we went and looked at each one of the documents. I actually learned, as a bit of a history buff, I'm not a historian, but George Washington signed the Constitution twice. He was the first to sign it at the close of the Constitutional Convention, but then a page I'd never even known existed was the page that transferred it to the states. He signed it again. So that's your trivia pursuit answer.
Thank you.
For later. But looking at the Constitution, it's kind of hard to read some of the early passages, except 3 words: we the people. And I really do believe that in these divisive times, the American people are going to make this thing right. We're going to raise up leadership, I hope, in both political parties, as good as our people, and that this season of divisiveness will give way to the kind of politics that will allow us to take on these intractable, larger issues. Because as I said memorably at the end of 2019, I was having a conversation with President Trump. And he said, hey, how do you think things look in the election next year? We were having lunch. And I said, well, look pretty good. And he said, I think we're in good shape. The economy's growing, the world's at peace. I think we're in good shape for the election. And I said to him, well, I agree with you, but I said, you know, sometimes history shows up. And he looked at me and said, what do you mean by that? I said, I don't know what I mean by that. I said, but sometimes shots are fired at Fort Sumter, sometimes an assassin bullet flies and takes down a young president. Sometimes, I mean, history pivots on bigger moments. Smoke rising in Pearl Harbor. Yeah. And he just kind of nodded and said, you're right. Neither one of us knowing that there was a virus spreading in China that was only being reported in limited ways in the world, that essentially would dominate much of the next year as we sought to save American lives. And so when I think about the need to achieve what I think this institute hopes to facilitate, and the kind of politics that you and we're both unapologetic conservatives, but we're not in a bad mood about it, right? I mean,
I'm going to make that my Twitter bio. I'm conservative, but I'm not in a bad mood about it.
The point is, we need to find a way to work together because history shows up. I don't know if that's going to be in the Straits of Taiwan, I don't know if it's going to be in the Middle East. I don't know if it's going to be in Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, when a NATO ally is suddenly confronted by an intractable enemy. But we've got to find a way to work together to preserve and promote and protect the greatest nation on earth.
Have you been paying any attention to Vice President Harris's book tour?
I have not. No,
She has a new book out, which sold extremely well. She sold 350,000 copies in the first week, which is very impressive. But in it, she took a very different route.
well, you know,
than
I
you
wrote
did.
a book too.
I know.
It's So Help Me God. It's available on Amazon.com and where all good books are sold.
Yes, but yours was not, I think, quite as juicy, I guess. She was really naming names. She goes after the Biden family, things about her staff, things about other politicians, some really unkind stuff about Gavin Newsom. If you could give her any advice right now about post-vice presidential life, what would you say?
Well, I don't know that I'd presume to give her advice. We have debated publicly before.
Fair.
And we have very different priorities and different views. I'll leave her to her
Sure.
her political and professional goals.
Sure.
But I hope for my part to be a part of a larger national conversation. Mm-hmm. You know, we talked before this event about civility, and I've said before, I think democracy depends on heavy doses of civility. And I had a sense when she and I were debating on that stage during the presidential election in 2020 that she instinctively shared the same principle. And so I would encourage her to lean on those better angels of her nature and encourage civility. Competition in primaries, which she may already be in right now, are one thing, but I think the American people would welcome us finding ways that we could talk to one another in new and in renewed ways.
I had to ask that question. It just was sitting there for me to ask you. If you don't mind, I would like to ask. Yes.
That debate night, I don't know if you watched the debate that night.
Yes, I did. Yes.
Yeah, it was, I mean, other than the fly, I thought the night went really well. I got to tell you the story about that, though.
Please do.
My daughter
I had a
Charlotte.
question about the fly, but I didn't know if it was like too lowbrow.
Yeah, no, it's perfectly fine. No, I had a debate, and you prepare for these things, and they tell you there's 50 million people watching, and you try not to think about that. And I prayed about it, and I got through it. I came off the stage. I felt okay. I thought it had gone okay. Yeah. And my wife Karen and Charlotte and my daughter-in-law Sarah, I'm married to our Marine son, are all standing there. And I said to Karen, "How'd it go?" And she said, "Oh, you were great. You did great." And Charlotte said, "Oh, Dad, you were super. You did great." And my daughter-in-law said, "Did you see the fly?" I said, "The fly?" I said, "Well, I saw one flying by. I don't know." She said, "It landed on you for a while." So I've already decided that, you know, when I get to glory, I have a little time with the Lord. There may be a moment where I look at the Lord and say, "Thank you for all the blessings, but the fly, was that absolutely necessary?"
No, I felt bad when that happened. I was like, no one can control anything like that. But I'm glad you have a sense of humor about it.
Yeah.
Saturday Night Live did a very funny parody. I don't know if you ever saw of it, but just the fly getting bigger and bigger. Have you ever met Vice President Vance, and what kind of job do you think he's doing?
Well, I pray for the vice president, even as I pray for the president, often. And I've not met him before, but you know, I admire anyone that's willing to step into that role.
Of course.
But a lot of people are surprised to know I hadn't met him. But he was actually something of a critic of our administration during our 4 years. He came around, which is fine. That's politics. That's okay. But he emerged in a race for the Senate after I had been retired. back to Indiana. So, but I wish him well, and you know, as I said, I skied behind that speedboat for 4 years, so I understand the unique role that he's in, and I just think my hope is that he'll offer to the president not only the counsel but also the support that any president needs in those moments. I took the policy when I was vice president of some advice I read from Walter Mondale during the transition in 2016. He said, everybody that comes in the Oval Office is just asking the president for something. But he said, it can't be like that with the vice president. So the vice president, Walter Mondale wrote, owes the president his opinion once and in private. And I hewed to that with very few exceptions. I would give the president the full range of my advice, but always just between us, except when circumstances or history required otherwise. And my hope, my prayer is that the vice president's hewing to that. And also, when the president makes the decision, apart from a moral or constitutional issue, the job of the vice president is to support the decision. And so
Thank you.
that would be my advice, my hope, my counsel.
If you don't mind, I would like to go to one of my audience questions. This is from Lynn. She says, I'm so scared for the country and the direction it's going. Do you have a message of hope for scared Americans?
Lynn, I would just tell you, just have faith in God and have faith in the American people. This is an incredible country. When you've had the kind of jobs I've had, as vice president, as a governor, as a congressman, you see the American people sometimes in the worst situations. In Indiana, when I was governor, it was when the tornadoes tore through communities. When I was vice president, it was hurricanes in Texas, wildfires in California. And I would always tell people that when you'd go to the scene of a disaster anywhere in the country, 12 hours after the storm blew through, the only thing you can't find in that area is a parking spot. Because people in this country drop whatever they're doing, load up their minivans and their pickup trucks, and they head to where the crisis hit. And they help people that they've never met before and will never see again. And my experience, and I'd say it to Lynn, is that the American people are the most generous, patriotic, gracious, kind, principled, hardworking people the world's ever known. And they'll set things right, I promise you.
I have one more from our two-way audience, and then I'm going to do a quick lightning round, and then I'm going to offer it up to the room, because I know all of you have some questions for the vice president as well. So just really quickly, Brenda from two-way asks, why do so many leaders fear populism? Is it true that populism only rises when the ruling class fails?
I think it's a really insightful comment, because I do think that the rise of the progressive left and the populist right are evidence of the failure of leadership to meet the expectations of the people. And so in my judgment, on either end of the spectrum, this is where the easy answers come from. The real work has to be done, whether it's confronting the national debt, whether it's making sure that we have policies that have a growing economy that works for all of the American people, whether we advance policies that respect the faith and values of the American people and their choices on education and the rest. But I think there has been we have been in a time where there's been a sense, as Ronald Reagan said, that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital could plan our lives better for us than we can plan them ourselves. And I understand that instinct. I understand the concern. But then I think it's incumbent on us to explain why free markets work better than socialism and a command and control economy, why American leadership in the world and America acting as leader of the free world leads us not to war, but to peace. why it's important that we have a Supreme Court that will hew to the Constitution as written, and that vouchsafes the values and the liberties of all of us. But I think so part of it is a failure of policy to confront these large issues, and also I think it's also a failure of just making sure we make the case for those timeless American values.
Thank you. We're going to do a quick lightning round, just quick response.
None of these are from my daughter, right?
None of them from your daughter. But I did have a little help. Lincoln or Reagan?
You know, Abraham Lincoln grew up in Indiana.
Okay. Town hall.
You didn't know that. We like to say in Indiana that Lincoln made Illinois, but Indiana made Lincoln. He moved to Indiana when he was about 6 years old and grew up on a little farm in Spencer County, and I admire him more than I could ever express.
Town hall or rally?
I love the town hall. Mm-hmm. I mean, I spoke at more rallies than I can remember and always cherished it. But for me, it's, you know, I used to have a radio show back before you were born. I know that. I'm
old. I'm 40.
I know I don't seem interesting enough to have had a radio show, but I was on the radio 3 hours a day, 6 days a week, all over the state of Indiana. And I was kind of like Rush Limbaugh on decaf.
That's a good line.
But my wife, after I'd come home and our kids were little, and sometimes she'd listen to the show, and I'd say, Did you hear the show? And she'd say, yeah, no, it was fine. And I said, you know, what'd you think? And she said, well, it got really good after you started taking calls. So I learned early on from my wife's blunt candor that I'm better at dialogue than monologue. So I like giving a good speech, but having a chance to be with citizens. I'd have when I was in Congress for 12 years, Meghan, I had a town hall in my district every month. Mm-hmm. And I always felt that strengthened my ability to then go back to Washington and carry the values and ideals and expectations of my people.
College football or NFL?
Indiana University football. Right now. No, you know what? I could never choose between Saturday and Sunday. I'm an IU football fan. We're excited this year with the program. Purdue's doing great, Notre Dame, but I'm a Colts fan from the day they got off the Mayflower trucks.
Butter sculptures at the state fair or food on a stick?
Oh, that's not even a close call. State fair is about food.
Okay, sounds good. Last one, Dolly or Reba?
Dolly. You gotta love Dolly. She had to cancel a concert this week, and she said, and you gotta love her. She just said, and it wasn't because I had an appointment with my plastic surgeon. Yeah. What a wonderful person. I wish her well. God bless her.
Yeah, she's an American icon as well. Well, thank you. I really appreciate all of you hosting us at the Edward Kennedy Institute, and obviously, Vice President Pence, it's such an honor to be able to interview you in this beautiful forum, and I want to open it up to questions from all of you. I understand people are going to come with microphones.
Mm-hmm. That'd be great. Want to guide us?
Sure. Do you want to start with you? Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Do I just speak here? He's got a microphone for you.
Yes, testing.
Yep, go ahead.
Well, thank you, Vice President Pence, and welcome to Hong Kong in January. And I would like to ask about your views on the midterm redistricting efforts advanced by both Democrats and Republicans in several states.
Mm-hmm. Well, we haven't had a tradition of mid-decade redistricting, but there's no prohibition against it. Congress actually considered making that statutory. Congress has some authority with regard to elections, but they never chose to do that. Generally, we've done redistricting after the decennial census is done. And for my part, my default setting, you might have already guessed, is the Constitution of the United States. And the Constitution essentially says that states conduct our election, time, place, and manner. They certify the Electoral College votes. But it was a very, very important principle in the Constitutional Convention that states control elections. And so I would defer whatever angst it creates for people. I would simply defer to state legislatures and to governors to determine what they think is appropriate with regard to the time, place, and manner of elections and the nature of districting, whether it be in Indiana or Texas, California, or anywhere else.
Right here, sir, in the blue shirt. Yeah, thank you. Mm-hmm.
Hi, thank you for coming to the Kennedy Institute. I'm from Dorchester, born and raised, middle class family.
Great.
Catholic, going to church every Sunday. Grandparents were from Ireland, County Mayo in Waterville, Kerry. You know, what's happened to the middle class now is insane to me. I find it interesting that no one wants to talk about that. The cost of inflation, the groceries at the store are up through the roof. You know, President Trump's talked about tariffs. I'm all about made in America. I'm a union worker, have been most of my life. Grew up as a Democrat. But where's the buck stop? And also, you know, we have a mental health problem in this country. We have a drug problem with fentanyl that no one wants to address. You know, it's funny. I was down in Mississippi 3 years ago, and I did not see a homeless person on the street. Now, you go to New York City, you see them all over the streets. About last year, I took a trip with a girlfriend to New York City, and I saw about a bunch of homeless people on the streets. We have a problem with mental health. How would you address that?
Well, briefly on your second topic. When I was governor of Indiana, in my last year in office, we broke ground on the first mental health hospital that had been built in our state in 30 years. It was sometime in the 1970s that our country walked away from institutional mental health. We just did. There are a lot of theories about it. Some people attribute it to a best-selling book that became a movie. One Flew Over the Cuckoo Nest. Some of the folks are old enough to remember it. Very dark depiction of institutional mental health in America. But what happened within a generation is states around the country just shut down what used to be called mental institutions, including in Indiana. I think the time has come for us to revisit and reestablish institutional mental health care in America. We started that in Indiana, and it's absolutely essential, I think, that we go back. I just think of the shooting that took place when we were in office in Florida. Meeting with the mother of the shooter, and we learned how many times she had gone to law enforcement and said, "He scares me. We have a problem." They had nowhere to go, nowhere to turn to, for her to go to court and to say this person needs institutional mental health care. So I'm strongly in agreement with you. With regard to the economics, look, I'm somebody that believes in free market economics, and part of that is free trade, okay? And I know that historically, the Democratic Party has been much more favorable to protectionist policies and tariffs, but one of the things that President Trump has brought into this term, different from ours, was the kind of broad-based unilateral tariffs against friend and foe alike that I think are contrary to American growth and prosperity. And I believe the evidence is now beginning to hit grocery store shelves, hardware store shelves. You're starting to see prices are up now. And that's because I have a news flash for you. American businesses and ultimately American consumers pay American tariffs. Okay? No, now, an exporter in France may take a little bit off their price to keep their market share, but it's the American company and ultimately the consumer that pays the price for tariffs. And it's something our foundation, you can visit us on X at American Freedom. We've been one of very few voices trying to make the case against that populist move toward protectionism because I think it ultimately is going to harm our economy, it's going to harm consumers, and it's going to harm manufacturing, my friend. Indiana's, you wouldn't know it, but we're like the second leading exporting state in the country per capita. What we make, what we grow, we sell to the world. And I will tell you right now, farmers are hurting across the heartland of America as a result of the fact that the retaliatory efforts that our trading partners have taken. I have to tell you, I think it was the Secretary of Agriculture who communicated recently, or was reported communicating recently, that Argentina, that we're offering a bailout to, just recently filled the soybean order that we usually fill to China, because China's not buying our soybeans at the rate they have in the past. So I think, look, I'm a big believer in free trade with free nations. Now, you might have caught the nuance there. With China, get as tough as you want on China. They've engaged in years of trade abuses, intellectual property theft. I think we can't be tough enough on China. And that includes making sure that we maintain a strong presence in the Asia-Pacific with our defense. But get very tough on them economically. But other trading partners, free nations around the world, the goal should be to lower barriers and let the American people buy and sell. That's contributed mightily to the prosperity of our country over the generations, and it will again.
I was trying to get a woman. Okay, then you, sir. You, sir, yeah, thank you.
Thank you both very much. It's a privilege to be here, particularly Mr. Vice President. I commend you on a tremendous political career. I woke up this morning, average Joe citizen, and two thoughts went through my mind. One is, I grew up in a world where I could watch a liberal conservative debate all day long, and then we go out to dinner together. Mm-hmm. So the one question is, how do we prevent this divergence which just continues? And rather than the word bipartisanship, I love the word unity. Is it even possible? Can we get there? And secondly, and this is to both of you, we talk about the deranged lunatic, and we go right to media and social media. Is there a way to put a rein around this? We know they're watching it and someone's getting the ideas there, to somehow put a rein around this, and what's even the possibility of that happening? Thank you.
Well, on your first point, again, I honestly believe that the American people in the days ahead are going to demand that we return to the kind of leadership that served our country so well. In a chamber that looks a lot like this, almost exactly like this, and at the other end of the street. You know, these entitlements that we have, and Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, we expanded Medicaid in Indiana, reformed it, introduced health savings accounts. I've always supported making sure the Social Security and Medicare is there. But we've got to bring about reforms in these systems if we're going to spare our country and our children and our grandchildren a mountain range of debt that there's no other place to go. And people say, well, you could never do that. You could never change the age of eligibility for Social Security. Well, to your point, Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill did. They extended the life of Social Security by decades by working together, making common cause. A couple of good Irishmen, I would say. And not so where you'd even notice. They brought about reforms in Social Security. They actually gradually increased the age of retirement and eligibility in Social Security and saved hundreds of billions, if not trillions of dollars for American taxpayers. We can do that again, but it really does begin with leadership and with supporting the kind of people that will carry that kind of leadership forward, and in both political parties. The second thing, I think a lot about social media. I don't know if you have thoughts about it. When I was in Congress, I authored what I think to this day is the only bill ever to pass Congress that put a restriction on the internet. It's interesting. It's a provocative thought. We've always maintained free and open message, but I authored a bill. It's called the Truth in Domain Names Act. This is 20 years ago. I was on the Judiciary Committee. What was going on is you had people that were running adult websites, and this will make you crazy as a mom. They were running adult websites with deceptive domain names, like bobthebuilder.com and dinsyland.com. And so we wrote a bill that simply said you can't engage in fraud on the internet with your domain name. You have to be upfront about what you are. And it actually passed the Congress, and I think resulted in a number of prosecutions of people and organizations that were really harming kids and trapping kids. I think, look, I'm a free speech absolutist, I am. But I get very troubled about what I see oftentimes on the internet that is anonymous. And candidly, I can tell you and speak with some authority, an awful lot to what happens in the debate on social media is coming from outside the borders of the United States. It just is. And we need to wake up to that fact. There are forces around the world, state actors around the world, that make it their business to sow division in countries across the free world. And so the next time you see a long screed of statements on social media, just you might ask yourself, are those really Americans? Who are they really? And I think, I would hope the Congress and frankly our tech companies around the country would think very carefully about how do we create greater accountability, greater transparency in the public debate so that we would know, look, my late father, combat veteran in the Korean War, said more times than I can remember, I might disagree with what you say, but I'll fight to the death for your right to say it. And he nearly did. So any American, their First Amendment rights, we stand by, but I think making sure that people say, if you want to stand up in the public square, be who you are. And if you actually aren't from here and you have other intentions, we need to know that too.
I think we have time for one more question. Should we try and get somebody up? Ma'am, right there, the green. Somebody way up high.
Hold the microphone. Hi. I just want to politely disagree with a couple of things that were said today. I have to admit that I'm a little disappointed in some of the statements that have been made. And so I'm going to point out three things rather quickly. First of all, you, Vice President Pence, you made a statement about how people who are behind mass killings or assassinations, how there should be quick justice for these people, that there should be due process, but once convicted, that there should be justice, quick justice. And yet, on January 6th, when people were saying, hang Mike Pence, hang Nancy Pelosi, that those insurrectionists were pardoned. And I want to know why the Republicans didn't stand up for justice. That's the first thing. The second thing was on FEMA. No, I'm sorry, that you talked about DOJ, and you talked about how good the American public is. And yet, USAID has been canceled, and FEMA has been minimized. And those are two wonderful programs that the good American people back, and they are being, as I said, dismantled and minimized. And then the third thing that really disturbs me is the comments in the very beginning that giving the impression that Democrats are more willing to tolerate or justify political violence. And yet, Republicans, time after time after time, vote against sensible gun laws. And I don't understand how you can justify these two comments. Why are gun laws, why do Democrats back gun laws, and why will Republicans not stop the slaughtering of American people in our country and vote for gun laws?
We're still in Boston.
Gee, look at the time. Thank you for thoughtful questions, well expressed. Let me take them in reverse order. Second Amendment, I cherish the Second Amendment of the Constitution as much as the First Amendment. It says the federal government, the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So I hold the view that it is at the core of our constitutional liberties, and I want to address the issue of violence in the ways that we talked about before, but not by eroding the liberties of law-abiding Americans. I think with regard to the cuts in the programs, you and I might not be too far apart. USAID had a lot of excesses, and there were, like any time in Washington, D.C., when you have these massive spending bills, a lot gets tucked into the pages at the end, and there was a lot that could be cleaned up. But when we talk about what's happening to farmers right now across the Midwest, USAID was a big purchaser of American agricultural goods. It's not happening right now. And I'm just telling you, here, sitting here in Boston, farmers are hurting right now. And more important than that, the humanitarian work that USAID performed may well suffer. There's hard power. Your late father was one of the greatest champions of hard power in modern American history, and of course paid an extraordinary price in the uniform of the United States. And this country will always honor the memory of John McCain.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
But there's also, to your point, there's soft power. Soft power is expressed in the generosity of the American people. And in my time on the International Relations Committee, in my time as Vice President, I saw the impact that the generosity of the American people had. President Bush's PEPFAR program that I supported as a member of Congress literally saved millions of lives in the AIDS pandemic across Africa. And to this day, when you travel in Africa and you speak to people from Africa, it's the first thing that comes up because it speaks to the American people. And at a time when China's making incredible investments all across the two-thirds world, if you will, especially in Africa, that kind of soft power is vitally important. And so I take your point. And of course, my hope is, well, there was talk early in this new administration about shutting down FEMA. I was pleased to see them reverse out on that. I spoke against it. Worked a lot with FEMA when I was governor. Saw FEMA on the ground when I was vice president. Got a lot of, ever since Hurricane Katrina, we had made extraordinary investments in improving our response rate in FEMA, and I'm pleased that they came off that agenda. Your last point is maybe the most profound, and it's one on which I assure you we agree. When I say that political violence should be universally condemned, I mean it. Now, I'll always believe by God's grace, I did my duty on January the 6th to see to the peaceful transfer of power under the Constitution of the United States. It was one of the moving parts of being in this replica of the U.S. Senate today, because I haven't been back on the floor of the U.S. Senate since that day. And to be here in this similar environment flooded my mind with memories. It was a day of tragedy, But I want to say to you, I hope and trust that it will be remembered as a triumph of freedom. Because thanks to the courage of law enforcement, the riot was quelled, and Republican and Democrat members of Congress reconvened in seats just like these the very same day and completed our work to see to the peaceful transfer of power. There was no one person, it was every member of both chambers that came back, stayed at their posts, did their duty. And I believe history will remember it that way. And with regard to the point you make, look, I have no doubt that day that there were people that got caught up in the day, that never engaged in violent vandalism, never assaulted a police officer. And I will tell you, I had no qualms about those people being pardoned. But people that violated the Capitol, who assaulted police officers, should never have been pardoned and should have served the time they were given in the fullest extent of the law. I said at the time it sent the wrong message. And my hope is as time goes on that people will come to see. We cannot, look, we've got some very distinguished retired law enforcement officers who I know are here in plain clothes, and we've got people wearing uniform looking after all of us today. And the debt we owe men and women in uniform, we can never fully repay. These are people that, whether it's your late father, other members of your family, my son, my unworthy son-in-law, people that put on a uniform every day basically say, as the good book says, that they're counting our lives more important than their own. And that's why we can never tolerate, we should never excuse, and I will never diminish the heroism of law enforcement that day. And I think that's a message that we need to be clear about, and I promise you I always will.
Well, I think that's it. Is it good on time? Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Vice President. Really such an honor. Thank you. And thank you all so much for having us. It's been such a pleasure.
Thank you.
Really, thank you so much. Really. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you all. Really briefly, I can't thank you both enough for such an insightful